Hay muchos países que quieren ponerle el guante a Venezuela. Esto es un juego calculado de muchas naciones y esta crisis le afecta a todos o sea, el que paga realmente los platos rotos son la población, pues, pero realmente esto es como un juego de muchos países y ellos están jugando a sus intereses. Además, aunado a todo esto, ese gobierno no sirve para nada. O sea, ya ustedes saben, vergüenza me da con ese presidente que tenemos.
Once Latin America's richest country, Venezuela, gradually started crashing towards socioeconomic and institutional collapse, facing an enormous regional humanitarian crisis and mass migration. More than 3 million Venezuelans have migrated to other safe places. According to a UN estimated report, by the end of 2019, there will be 5.3 million refugees from Venezuela. Refugees who have reached neighboring countries are often forced to beg until they get enough resources for their survival. Currently, up to 90% of the population lives under the poverty line and are not even able to fulfill basic necessities of life. Medical centers are facing damaging power breakdowns, along with a shortage of roughly 85% of medical supplies within the country. Inflation is on its peak, skyrocketing prices of basic goods, with its skyrocketing crime on the streets, making robbery a commonplace offense with the increasing rate of violence in Venezuela.
Y lo que más nos asustó fue que nos dijeron que iban a secuestrar a nuestro hijo y a hacerle cosas horribles, a violarlo y no sé qué más. Entonces, en vista de eso, mi hijo no fue al colegio en todo el año y yo no lo pude llevar más al colegio. Y nos dijeron que nosotros, o sea, que si tú no pagas el dinero, entonces vamos a robarnos a tu hijo. Y por eso no lo llevamos, pues.
It's hard to say how it's going to go. We now have two presidents, Guaido and Maduro. It's a humanitarian crisis, it's a political crisis, it's even an energy crisis within Venezuela because of the breakdown of the hydropower electricity system, and it seems to be in a stalemate.
It is surprising how the Venezuelan crisis became such a pressing issue in the world of news within such a short period of time. By following current events, the documentary aims to investigate the main origins of the crisis.
The continuing tendency of the government to control the economy and to control society has become a crisis, because it was not possible to control everything, and that in the first place, and in the second place, they failed to invest the money which came in from the oil revenues in infrastructure and development. So what we see now is a total bankruptcy of a project, of a system which was based on centralization of the economy and also clientelism. So spending the money, giving it in social programs, giving it away to the people instead of investing it in the future, like infrastructure, employment, industries, etc.
The current Venezuelan crisis, I think, it comes at the intersection of several factors. First of all, is the very long-term structure of the oil economy, which has been a century in the making, which has completely distorted the territorial structure, the socioeconomic structure of Venezuela. People left the countryside, moved to the cities, stopped producing the things that they needed, and began to simply import goods on the back of huge oil revenues. Now, this all, there are periods, of course, where the price of oil goes up and down, and yet you've really never seen a period in which Venezuela has consistently reversed this trend, created by the oil economy, and has, consistently created and built new production in the countryside. Chavismo has attempted that. Many of those attempts were sustained, and yet were not sufficient to the task of really reversing oil development and creating a different kind of economy, although this was the goal of many Chavistas. The crisis, however, is related to this. It comes out of the currency, the attempt to hold the currency firm in a global context, which created certain, problems beginning in 2013. And these were dramatically exacerbated when Chavez died, when the price of global oil collapsed, and when the Venezuelan opposition, and later the US opposition then, of course, began to aggressively attack the Venezuelan government. So all of these things came together beginning in 2013 in what's really been a sustained crisis since then, that involves bloody protests in the streets, that involves declining oil revenue, and that involves outright political aggression.
Venezuela has had the world's largest oil reserves. Oil production contributes to 98% revenue generation. In 1999, Venezuela was producing 3 million barrels of oil per day, which decreased over the decade down to 1 million barrels of oil per day.
Well, it is what makes Venezuela more important than other issues. Like in the invasion of Kuwait, which is basically desert, it would not have much political impact if Kuwait had not been a major oil exporter. The same goes for Venezuela. It catches the public eye internationally, and the geopolitical strategies are made in part with a view to safeguarding the stability and continuity of Venezuelan oil supplies. Venezuela is one of the top 5 OPEC producers, and producing a lot for US but also Chinese market, and both countries don't want the energy prices, global oil prices, to skyrocket because of destabilization of a big producer.
And you see also international actors like United States and Russia and China, like say, involved in the crisis, in the sense that they are all interested in the oil. They're all interested in having an influence in the region via Venezuela. But basically, if you look at the main factors which caused the current crisis, I would call it a rather domestic crisis, because if you look at other countries in the region and you compare the current economic situation, the national income, the development, the inflation, you see a huge difference between Venezuela and the surrounding countries. And that's not only because they call themselves socialists, because a lot of policies which were done by the Chavez government were not so special in the Latin American context.
Then what consequences became a stumbling block for Venezuela to develop and sustain itself in an ever-changing world?
The goal has always been that. However, under Chavez as well, they would expand production in one sector, but it's very, very difficult in an oil economy. It goes against every incentive of an oil economy. When oil is at $120 a barrel, it's much, much cheaper to purchase food from Brazil than it is to invest in local campesino farmers who are growing that food. And so it would go back and forth under Chavez even. They'd expand production in one sector, it would collapse, expand it over here, it would collapse, because it really requires sustained support, sustained attention, and that's something that's been lacking.
I think when there were a wise policy of investment in gold mining and in other sectors of the mining industry or agriculture, Venezuela would be able very much to diverse its economy and to take advantage of that. And but at this moment there's no money to invest, because they have digged themselves in. They had a lot of loans from international banks, but also from China, from Russia, and they used the money not to invest in the economy, but to give it away to the people, to keep them loyal.
Is the oil the only reason behind this conflict, or are there some other variables which are not being brought into account?
Well, let me be clear. When the crisis went really heavy after this moment when the oil prices went down, but the cause, the origin of the crisis was not the oil price. We saw in the period before we saw high oil prices, and at the same time there was a lot of corruption, a lot of mismanagement, and a lot of clientelism, which is giving the money away to buy the voters. This was not a problem because the oil price was high and the money kept on coming in. But once the price went down, then all these other problems became visible. So what happened is that when the oil price went down, you saw what was wrong with the whole system. It was not that the system went down because of the low oil price, it was that the high oil price hid the problems, and when it went down, we saw these problems visible, like, as I said, corruption, clientelism, and mismanagement.
I mean, it has been historically oil. However, more recently, the turn has been in Venezuela toward extracting other incredibly valuable natural resources from what's called the mining arc. This vast expanse where gold and other, and other resources have been mined for many years now. Although there's going to be maybe an expansion of that mining. So all these things matter. All these resources matter. And of course, as the political question matters. The question of Venezuela as key to helping control, South America as a whole. It's got an access to the Orinoco and to the Amazon region. It's got an access to the Andean region by Colombia. And these are all sort of crucial elements of why the U.S. wants to reassert power and is even possibly considering military intervention at this point.
The people of Venezuela are standing for freedom and democracy, and the United States of America is standing right by their side.
Despite resolving the crisis, the international actors took advantage and the situation became a tug of war between three superpowers: US, China, and Russia.
If you see the position of the international actors, they are not aligning to see, okay, what is best for Venezuela, how can we act in the interest of the Venezuelan people, because other interests are also on the table as a hidden agenda or as an open agenda.
Who took advantage of the current situation were basically Russia and China. Because they were seen as political partners from the Venezuelan government, so they were the ones who were able to give loans and to have stakes in the national oil industry. You see the Russian Rosneft having invested heavily and also having possibilities in the Venezuelan oil industry. In change of oil?
Well, the United States position has always been a complicated one because they want to get rid of Chavismo. They've wanted to from the beginning. It's been Bush, also Obama, Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, and now Trump. The position has been the same. This is what they want. The question has been, what kind of risks are they willing to take to accomplish it? So there was a failed coup in 2002 under Bush. But under Obama, they took a strategy more of simply funding the Venezuelan opposition and trying to get them to win elections. Now they're willing to support coups. Obama supported a coup in Honduras in 2009. But the stakes in Venezuela are much higher because of the oil. The failure in the short term for the U.S. could disrupt that oil supply, although the United States is becoming more independent of that. And now Trump is essentially wagering it all in an attempt to completely replace the government.
Besides all these dynamics, Venezuela has a notable foreign policy and the relations with Latin American countries, which have made Venezuela stronger, but at the same time made it a threat for major world powers.
It was for me a surprising aspect of this crisis to see how the Latin American countries are in a way divided over this.
It's not that Venezuela itself was such a big threat to U.S. power. It's that Chavez helped to build a coalition across Latin America, including Brazil and Chile and Argentina and other countries, a broad left wing known as the Pink Tide. And part of what this Pink Tide stood for was autonomy and sovereignty and resistance to U.S. intervention. And so as a whole, that alternative that was posed by this pink tide was considered to be a threat to US domination, control, ability to intervene. And of course, they're concerned that someone else, Russia and China, might intervene, but they're much more concerned with the fact that this is what they consider to be their own backyard, and they want control over it.
Pero además, hay algunos países de la región que han hecho de este dolor y de esta crisis un negocio. Las bolsas de comida, las llamadas bolsas CLAP, de esos llamados comités locales de abastecimiento y producción, ¿de dónde vienen? Vienen de países como México, vienen de países como Uruguay, algunas veces de Chile, de manera que allí también hay un negocio.
The situation in Venezuela is still unfolding. Sitting on the largest oil reserve, the Maduro government failed to distribute the wealth wisely among the nation. His policies were criticized widely, but at the same time, oil prices and American sanctions affected his policies badly.
In the short term, let's say in the next coming months, we see more crisis, more economical crisis, because the money is gone, there's no money to buy anything, and more repression, because people will protest and people are repressed on the streets. And then in the longer term, it's very dangerous to make any predictions on this. What we see is that the international community is still very let's say, they don't want to intervene militarily, but they want to intervene humanitarily, so with the humanitarian aid, which is an issue in itself. So, like say, to resume the story, I think that Maduro is still not leaving, and we will see a very bad situation for the time being.
If the Maduro regime is replaced by Guaido, how effective will his new agenda be? How will he tackle with a $100 billion loan from outside creditors, about $20 billion loan from China, and $2.3 billion loan from Russia? So far, it appears that the flexibility in loans from Russia are only associated with Maduro's government, raising the question, what will happen after the regime change?
Many people want Maduro out, but what will they get instead? And Guaido represents a kind of neoliberal agenda, so what will that be the dominant agenda, and how will that affect people? Because this can, so I don't think it will be heaven once Maduro is out. There can be other complicating factors. And finally, like I said, I'm worried that many actors who will influence the process will not act with the best interest of the Venezuelans in mind, but will also be very concerned with their own interest.
And because, if anything, the grassroots sectors are the only possibility for continuing this revolutionary process. If they are the ones who push forward, who help to build a new alternative and use this crisis as an opportunity to build a different kind of economy, a different kind of government, one with less corruption, one with more domestic production, more democratic on the grassroots level, this is really the only good possibility for a solution to this crisis.
It is tragic to see the humanitarian crisis at the level Venezuela has reached. It is sad that international actors see the crisis as an opportunity to demonstrate their power to the world.
Nuestra crisis parece ser un juego de poderes en el que no se ve una solución inmediata. Es triste decirlo, pero es así. Y en el medio de eso, en ese juego de poderes, está el sufrimiento de la población venezolana.
The recent world crises, which were created by international actors, for example in countries such as Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan, where conflicts still have not been stabilized, and countless lives have faced danger and death. Similarly, the Venezuela is a dilemma yet to be solved.
Whatever reason behind this crisis, as a Venezuelan, I will say that every passing day, the situation is getting worse. Shortage of food, access of medical facilities, mass migration. Once my country was productive in different areas. Now we, the Venezuelan diaspora and the Venezuelan population itself, are here and there, just wondering when the crisis resolved and when we will see a new sunrise of my motherland, Venezuela.